Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. There's a hell of a lot unfolding around the country as we speak. We're going to start the show with some additional exclusive polls here with JL Partners about how Israel may impact 2024. We've got it broken down by age demographic, and it's a pretty fascinating look at how different age groups are viewing this conflict. We've also got a look at a new bad poll actually a couple new bad polls for Biden, both in terms of the overall general electorate and also in terms of the battleground states. We've been tracking some wild crackdowns. We've got some unbelievable video for you coming out of UT Austin. We also have at Columbia, student protesters have taken over the same campus building that they did back in 1968, obviously very intentional there. Also getting reports out of Virginia's VCU where they tear-gassed protesters, so a lot unfolding there. We're also taking a look this morning at the housing market and a little bit of a helpful story. Some state and federal pushback on the trend of Wall Street buying up single-family housing and making it wildly unaffordable, something a little bit hopeful there. Something not so hopeful, though, Israel is reportedly preparing to install checkpoints to make sure that men are locked into Rafah when they begin their all-out assault. We'll take a look at that and also some recent comments from Tony Blinken and potential progress on ceasefire, ICC possible arrest warrants, a lot going on there. We also want to show you a notable exchange between Piers Morgan and John Mearsheimer. Very interesting.
It's so good.
Very divergent ideological views of America's role in the world, so worth getting into that. I've got a monologue. I'm looking at all of the people who are so very confused why anyone would protest their government helping to participate in genocide in the Gaza Strip. And big news, presidential candidate for the Green Party, Dr. Jill Stein, is going to join us. Very noteworthy for her to be here this week. We showed you yesterday she was arrested and assaulted by a police officer with a bike. Want to check in on how she's doing and what her goals are for her campaign. So really honored to be joined by her this morning.
We got really lucky. We booked her a long time ago, and then it just so happened that this entire thing had happened. So we're going to debrief the incident with her. We appreciate everybody who's been signing up to support us. So we had that exclusive poll yesterday. We're going to debut even more of the information now today. We've got a candidate interview here with Jill Stein. So this is really what we're all about, which is doing something the mainstream media is physically incapable of, actually asking real questions, delving into their effect. We're showing everything that we've got to you. And with Jill Stein, we're going to hear her out the way that we will hear out any independent candidate for president, given the fact that she's going to get ballot access most likely in many of these states, and of course was blamed for Hillary's loss in 2016. She was blamed. Obviously, it's complete BS. Right. We are very proud to be able to give her a platform to hear her out and speak for democracy. So she will have a highly consequential role in this election, and we're going to give her the due that most people are not willing to do. So anyway, you can help us out at breakingpoints.com. We would really appreciate it. As Krystal said, though, we do have a lot more exclusive polling. Today, we're going to break it down in terms of how Americans feel about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and we're also going to break it down by age. So why don't we go ahead and start with our very first one. We can go and put this up there on the screen. These are the top line numbers, guys. As a reminder, who do you most trust to handle foreign policy on the Israel-Palestine conflict? There's a bad number here for Joe Biden. Joe Biden, 31%. Donald Trump, 35%. Robert Kennedy Jr., 9%. Don't know at 25%. So obviously a little bit there up for grabs. But let's break it down by age now, if we can go to the next one, because this is the most consequential. And I'm just going to read by age demographic as it is before you guys so you understand. Again, the question is, who do you most trust to handle foreign policy on the Israel-Palestine conflict? So starting with the 18 to 29 demographic, Joe Biden, 21%. Donald Trump, 31%. Robert Kennedy Jr., 13%, don't know, 36%. Now we're moving to the 30 to 49, 28% for Joe Biden, 34% for Donald Trump, 12% for Robert Kennedy Jr., 26% for don't know. For 50 to 64, we have 35% Joe Biden, 36% Donald Trump, 7% Robert Kennedy Jr., 22% for don't know. But then amongst boomers, this is where things get interesting, 65 plus, 39% for Joe Biden, 40% for Donald Trump, 5% for RFK Jr., 16% for don't know. So it is very clear here again, Krystal, that Joe Biden's best numbers on the who you trust for Israel-Palestine are amongst the 50 to 64 and the 65 plus demographic, relatively tied with Donald Trump in those two. But when you go actually to younger voters, it is Trump who leads presumably amongst younger Republicans, but Joe Biden has absolutely no trust amongst the younger demographic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at every single age demographic, I mean, many of these are within the margin of error, especially among the older groups, but Trump edges them out in every category.
Yep.
So listen, the reality, of course, in terms of how they would handle this conflict, is probably very similar. All three of these candidates are extremely pro-Israel, basically lockstep in their views. We're going to talk later about, Trump truthed that they need to quote, stop the protests. So he's a little more like vociferous and clear in his language, but Joe Biden has been overseeing this authoritarian crackdown. Don't know what RFK Jr. would do. Haven't heard him comment on this specifically. Not that he hasn't said anything. I haven't seen him say anything, but they're basically aligned on the policy. So there's not a lot here to dissent from. But in terms of the political impact, this continues to show that for young people in particular, there is a sizable minority, I'm not saying it's a majority, but a sizable minority for whom this is the number one issue. This is the issue they will vote or not vote on. And he's lost them. I don't think there's anything he could do at this point to make it up to them, because it's been almost 7 months now. They've watched these horrors unfold. They've seen the way they've been routinely smeared from the White House podium. And yeah, all of your cajoling is not going to do any good when they're like, your guy is helping with the genocide, and by the way, smears us at every single chance that he gets.
You know what?
So it is a dire political situation for Joe Biden.
Something I was thinking about too is that there's a more honest pro-Israel support for Donald Trump, because Trump doesn't even pretend. Whereas with Biden, he does basically have the same policy vis-a-vis Israel, but then rhetorically, is of course trying to appease human rights concerns and others. RFK Jr. also is the same, much like Trump. It's just like, yeah, I support Israel. 100%. So, in a certain way, there's an honest, at least representation, I think, by both Trump and I guess RFK Jr. to a certain extent. Whereas with Biden, on a policy level, anybody who's smart enough to pay attention to the conflict, they know. There's also about him having the power. He actually has the power, and he's enacted that. And I think that's the key part.
That's it, is if you look at his overall approval ratings in other polls on Israel-Palestine, it is the worst area for him, because you have people who are vehemently pro-Israel who are like, how dare you even suggest that Israel should rein things in or say that that's over the top, their response. And then you have people who are like, this is a genocide and I hate that you're overseeing a genocide. I mean, I'm not alone in feeling like many of the things I was most terrified under Trump are coming true before my eyes under Joe Biden. So, yeah, you are really not pleasing anyone at this point. You're certainly not pleasing your own base, which is wildly at odds with what your policy has truly been. And the bottom line is, this isn't unfolding under Donald Trump. It isn't unfolding under RFK Jr. It's unfolding under your watch. And so if people who are not happy with the direction of the policy in any direction, they're gonna blame you. So it makes sense from that perspective that, Donald Trump would edge him out. But it's not like he has a huge, clear lead here on the conflict either, because I don't think people feel like he's particularly trustworthy when it comes to foreign affairs either.
I think we can think of Israel like abortion. It is a very animating issue for some people. And amongst those people, they're gonna have real litmus tests.
Yeah,
I'm talking more about in the pro-life community in particular.
Yeah, that's
and so if we think about it that way, it actually makes sense electorally. You're gonna see this in our next graphic. Let's go and put this up there on the screen, because this illustrates a little bit what we're talking about. How do you feel Joe Biden is handling the conflict? So doing well is 27%. Neither well or badly, 18%. Doing badly, 49%. Don't know, 6%. Let's go to the next part. This again breaks it down by age. I'll start with the 18 to 29 demographic. For Joe Biden, doing well, 18%. Neither, 17%. Doing badly, 54%.
Majority.
11% is don't know. Yeah, that's right, majority of people. Now, actually, amongst the 30 to 49, you see similar numbers. 26% say he's doing well, 18% neither. Doing badly is 48%. That's, 48% of people. That's a pretty decent amount. Definitely plurality within that age group. And then don't know at 8%. 50 to 64, you see similar. 29% doing well, 21% neither well or badly, 47% doing badly, 3% don't know. And then amongst boomers, this, again, there's some interesting numbers. 32% 22% doing well. So definitely the highest percentage of people say he's doing well. 14% saying neither well or badly. So basically a wash. But you still got a full 50% of people, boomers, saying doing badly. Probably more pro-Israel in the way that they think about it. And 4% say don't know. So interesting that the 50 plus demographic has more definite opinions on where he's doing well or badly. But there is a sizable doing badly figure. Let's go to the next one because this is probably
it's near majorities in every single age group.
That's right.
Even with the option of don't know, it's still near majorities in every age group that's like, you suck.
Absolutely. Now, this is the key question, actually. Are you more or less likely to support a candidate that strongly supports Israel? More likely, 35%. Doesn't matter, 31%. Less likely, 18%. Don't know, 16. So it is not a majority. It's not even the biggest number by far in this. Israel is a wash for most people, and that makes sense. But again, amongst that fervor, let's break it down by age because this is where it matters the most. Are you more or less likely to support a candidate that strongly supports Israel? Amongst 18 to 29, here we see 24% more likely, 26% doesn't matter, but you've got a third who are saying 31% less likely, 18% don't know. Now, amongst the rest of the age groups, so like, for example, 30 to 49, 27% more likely, 35% doesn't matter, 19% less likely, 20% don't know, 50 to 64, 35% more likely, 34% doesn't matter, 15% less likely, 16% don't know. But then here amongst boomers, you can actually see the switch. 56% say more likely to support somebody who strongly supports Israel. 27% don't know, less likely 8, and 10 amongst the don't know figure for the boomers. So overall, you've got a pretty decent chunk there of 18 to 29-year-olds in the less likely category, and then you've got a big chunk there of boomers in the more likely category. So that is the big generational square off there, Krystal. Overall, again, I mean, nobody should pretend the entire election is going to be determined on this. The question is only about this, again, the pro-lifers. Pro-lifers within the GOP, maybe 20%, 15%, at best, but they rule the day for a reason because you needed them to get you over that finish line. So we should think about it as a minority which has sizable voting power and is a very important part of the overall constituency because of young voters and their importance for turnout in a high turnout election.
Well, that's the thing. No one's saying this is going to be the top issue for everyone.
Right.
But given what is likely to be a very close election, it actually could be determinative. You only need a relatively small minority of people who are voting on this issue for it to be the determinative factor. I'm looking at, now, listen, anytime you look at these subsamples in one poll, take them with grains of salt, et cetera, yes. But in the recent CNN poll, among voters age 18 to 35, you've got Trump beating Biden by 11 points. Trump beating Biden among young voters by 11 points. As a reminder, back in April of 2020, heading into that election, Biden was up on Trump by 31 points in this same poll. So not all of that is Israel-Palestine, but some of it is, because we know how we can see what's unfolding on college campuses around the country. We can see how important this issue is to a certain segment of young voters in particular. And so, in fact, it really could be determinative. We also asked that question the other way in terms of, are you more or less likely to support a candidate that strongly supports Palestine? I can put these numbers up on the screen. So here you've got the top line numbers. And you've got 18% who are saying it's more likely, and you've got 31%, so plurality, saying it's less likely. Another 31% say, I don't really care. Let's put the age numbers up because, once again, you see the divide. Among the youngest demographic, 36% say, hey, if that candidate strongly supports Palestine, that makes me more likely to want to vote for them. And the less likely category is only 23%. Total reversal among, the older you go up the demographic chain. You've got among 65 plus, only 7% say support for Palestine makes them more likely, and 48% say that it makes it less likely. And also keep in mind, we also broke out these poll numbers by media consumption habits.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you'd expect. Young voters are overwhelmingly, a majority, strong majority, I think it was like 59%, are getting their news from social media, to include TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. And older voters are overwhelmingly getting their news from cable news. Now, part of that is those platforms, because those are the demographics they're serving. They serve content that fits their pre-existing views. And part of that is, I would say in particular, when it comes to cable news, shaping their view of the conflict and really helping to reinforce and further strengthen this divide between the demographics. But that's also an important part of what we're seeing here. And, it also helps make sense why, like Joe Biden, for example, in spite of the fact that the Democratic Party is not with him on this policy.
Yes.
But as you point out over and over again, I mean, young people, they vote, but it's not in the same numbers as the oldest demographics. Not to mention Joe Biden is 323 years old. So these are the people that he identifies with most and who he shares their worldview. So it's both ideological and it's political. And then when you add in the influence of AIPAC money and the military-industrial complex, that's how you end up with this very perplexing situation where you've got a Democratic president who seems to be willing to sacrifice his own reelection because in his political career, it has never politically been the wrong move to support Israel too strongly. No politician in his experience has ever paid a price for that. He may here be the first one, given how clearly animating this is for young voters above all other demographics.
It's very possible. Again, we have no idea what effect this will all have on the margins, but this is, and I have to put numbers here behind this because people get angry. They're like, what do you mean young people don't vote? Only about 52% of eligible voters between 18 to 29 voted in the 2020 election, and that was 8% higher than the 2016 election, just so people understand. So actually in 2016, the majority of young people didn't vote who were eligible to vote. Now, what do everybody think that the number is for the boomers? Age 65 plus, 70% of them voted in this 2016 election. 74% of them voted in the 2020 election. Now, if we're a high turnout election, 2020 was a record high for turnout. There's actually no expectation that we should come even close to that. If we see changes, let's say, in vote by mail or in general, 2020 was just such a high tension political year. In a lot of respects, while people are upset, people feel a little bit more tuned out than ever from politics today. We know that, by the way, from data. There is tons of data out there that shows that news consumption, not our show necessarily, but all for general election news, is at a record low for this time around.
Yeah.
That is very indicative of people tuning out, which means they're not going to vote. So if we have a lower turnout election, you have youth turnout at 40, 50% again, but the boomer turnout remains steady at normal levels, just say it normalizes to 70, again, you're going to see a big increase in the amount of people who are voting who are older. Now, look, there's a lot of changes to this, right? Abortion scrambled everything, so don't get me wrong.
That's right.
If anything, I personally would bet on record high Democratic women turnout more than anything because of abortion. Now, those people, I don't know what they feel about Israel, but I know they definitely care about abortion more than anything else. So they're still going to be coming out. I wouldn't write Biden off. I continue to see that, though, Krystal. There are a lot of people out there who are like, Biden is cooked and all of that. But, having sat in the studio for the 2022 election, it's just been burned, and seen too much with the referendums and all that. I refuse to discount any context of a surprise because of the abortion question, which I always want to lay out in these sorts of segments.
In my view, it's really 50-50.
I agree with that.
I really think it's 50-50. On the one hand, obviously, as we're talking about, Joe Biden has huge issues with young people. He does. Huge issues. If you look at his approval rating, this is supposed to be the core of the Democratic base, and they hate his guts. His approval rating is at its lowest among that demographic. That should be the reverse. He should, judging by recent Democratic Party history, have his highest approval rating among young voters, and they despise him. Abortion is the other side of the coin, though. It's a disaster for the Republican Party, and it has specifically been a disaster, provably, in election after election for Republicans. So it's not just ballot initiatives. It really has translated into strong Democratic performance when people actually have to show up and vote. On the other hand, those are special elections. The turnout is smaller. What happens in a general election? There are way too many factors, and the polls are way too unreliable to actually say who is up, who is down, how this is all likely to unfold. And then you also have all the Trump courtroom drama, which God knows what that's going to do, if anything. So anyone who's telling you, for sure this person's going to win or for sure that person's going to win, they have no idea. They have no idea. We have no idea. All we can tell you is some of the factors that are going into this mix, and it is a truly complicated brew.
We are only trying to present you what most people don't. And this is my biggest problem with cable, is that they are all about just single narratives. They don't prepare their audiences for, I mean, it would be the easiest thing in the world. Biden is cooked. That's an easy way to get views. We're not gonna lie to you people because you're gonna look like an idiot, you know? And that's, a lot of people did look that way back in 2022. It's very important. What we're trying to do here is present the whole picture for what everybody can take away. So thank you for supporting this polling, because it really does, you know, help me at least understand like the effects of it and kind of wrap my head around it. And I hope it does the same for everybody too.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.